My younger brother proposed to my fiancée, who also happens to be his ex, and then involved my whole family in the mess. I am furious. I am 28 years old, and my brother, Luke, is 26. A year ago, Luke briefly dated my fiancée, Emily, who is also 26. For some context, their relationship started in August 2022. They only lasted about a month before Luke broke it off because he said he was bored and not interested in settling down. At the time they were dating, I was living in another state, so I had no clue he even had a girlfriend, let alone that Emily existed. Emily and I met completely by chance at a bar when I moved back to town that October. We hit it off instantly. She was the most beautiful and intelligent woman I had ever met, and after seeing each other a few more times, we decided to make it official. By December, things were going so well that I finally brought her up to my family and suggested they meet her over Christmas. My family knew I was dating someone, but I am pretty private about my personal life. I intentionally kept the details vague until I was sure we were serious. When my parents asked to see pictures of Emily, I handed them my phone, and they passed it around the table. That's when Luke saw it and completely lost his cool. He accused me of being a terrible brother for dating his ex-girlfriend and demanded that I break it off with her. I told him no. Afterward, I asked Emily about it, and she confirmed they had briefly dated and explained the circumstances of their breakup. It was awkward for a little while, but eventually, Luke stopped mentioning it, and I assumed he had moved on. Fast forward to this year, on Emily's birthday. I planned a special dinner at a fancy restaurant and invited both of our families and her closest friends. At the dinner, I proposed to her, and she said yes. Everyone was thrilled except Luke. He exploded again, ranting about how wrong it was for me to marry her. My sisters and I shut him down immediately. The real disaster, though, happened last weekend. Luke had been pretty quiet for the last couple of months, so I figured he was keeping his distance. Then, out of nowhere, he invited Emily and me to a family dinner at his apartment. My parents and sisters were also going, so we decided to accept the invitation, even though it felt a little strange. The dinner itself was nice, just a simple family gathering. Afterward, we all moved to the living room to chat. About 30 minutes into the conversation, Luke stood up and announced he had something important to share. He made this long, dramatic speech about how happy he was to have us all there to witness his big moment. Then he pulled out this cheap-looking ring, got down on one knee, and proposed to Emily. Emily looked absolutely horrified. She told him to stop and stand up immediately. My dad tried to grab Luke, but I got to him first and punched him. I will not repeat most of what he said, partly because I was too angry to really hear it. But the gist of it was that he wanted to prove Emily was only with me to spite him. Before things could escalate further, my parents dragged me out of there, promising to talk to Luke about his behavior. It has been a few days since the incident, and I am still seething. I am worried this whole mess might make Emily reconsider marrying me. I honestly do not know what to do. Edit. First, thank you to everyone who has taken the time to read and offer advice. I spent a lot of time going through the comments last night and this morning, and you all have made some excellent points. To clarify a few things. Emily and I are newly engaged. It is one of those situations where we both know we are in it for the long haul. I know it seems fast, but I have no doubts about her. When we met, I approached Emily, not the other way around. Whether she had any suspicions we were related, I cannot say for sure. I asked her after finding out they had dated, and she told me she had no idea Luke was my brother. I believe her, but I admit Luke's extreme reaction does raise some questions. I had no idea Emily and Luke had dated when I met her. Luke and I are not close at all. We used to be when we were younger, but as we got older, we drifted apart and barely spoke, except for birthdays or other special occasions. Before I moved back home, we only communicated sporadically. Emily knew I had a family but did not know much about them until I was ready to introduce her to them. When she and Luke saw each other again, I did not notice any lingering feelings from either of them. She treated him like anyone else, and he was civil for the most part. Luke and Emily only dated for a month. I did not think I needed to ask his permission to propose to her, but maybe I was wrong about that. This weekend, I am planning to talk to Luke directly and try to get everything out in the open. I never asked for his side of their story, which I admit was a mistake. I will update if anything significant happens. Comments where I replied. Do not let anyone guilt trip you with the "but he is family" nonsense. Luckily, I have not had to hear that line too often, except from my mom and a couple of aunts. They know me well enough to realize that my relationship with Jason is not strong enough for me to put up with his disrespect, especially toward my fiancée. Honestly, any attempt to defend him would just be a waste of time. As for Rachel? No, I am not worried about her going back to him. She cannot stand him, and honestly, I think that is putting it lightly. Update 1. First off, I want to thank everyone for reading and sharing your thoughts. The past few days have been a whirlwind, so I have not been able to reply to as many comments as I would have liked, but I have gone through the feedback and appreciate every perspective, yes, even the critical ones. Here is where things stand now. I decided to reach out to Jason and invited him over to my place for a conversation. I told him that Rachel would be present as well, but if he felt uncomfortable, I was okay with just the two of us talking. He agreed to meet with both of us and showed up earlier today around noon. The first few minutes were awkward. Neither of us said much until I finally broke the silence. I started by apologizing. I told him I should have given him a heads up about proposing to Rachel and also admitted I should not have hit him at the family dinner. He dismissed it with a casual whatever but said he appreciated me apologizing. After that, I asked him to clarify some things about his past relationship with Rachel. I explained that his extreme reaction had thrown me off and made me wonder if I was missing something important. Jason admitted that their relationship lasted only a few weeks and that he had ended it because he lost interest. Rachel then asked him directly if his behavior stemmed from lingering feelings or regrets. He hesitated but ultimately admitted that while he thought she looked better now than the last time he saw her, he did not have any emotional attachment or regrets about breaking up with her. Instead, Jason said his issue was seeing someone he dated even briefly end up with his brother. He claimed that, as a man, I should have known better than to pursue a relationship with someone who had been with him. I reminded him that I had no idea they had ever been involved when Rachel and I met. He shrugged and told me that should not have mattered, I should have ended things once I found out. He was insistent that, if the situation were reversed, he would have walked away. I will be honest, I do not believe him for a second. When I asked him why he proposed to Rachel at all, his explanation floored me. He told me that a friend of his, someone who knew about his brief relationship with Rachel, had planted the idea in his head. According to Jason, his friend suggested that maybe Rachel had started dating me as some sort of revenge against him. Jason admitted he believed it. He thought proposing to Rachel would test her loyalty and prove whether she was truly over him. Rachel was furious. She asked him what made him think she was still hung up on him, and he said he had heard through mutual acquaintances that she had asked about him after their breakup. He also mentioned that she continued hanging out at places they used to visit together. Seeing her show up with me, his brother, was apparently enough for him to assume she had ulterior motives. Rachel shot back, telling him that she had only asked about him once and that the places she went were spots she had always enjoyed with friends. She refused to avoid them just because of a short-lived relationship. She made it clear how insulted she was by his assumption that she would stoop so low as to use me as part of some petty game to get back at him. Jason gave her a half-hearted apology, shrugging and saying, "You have to see it from my perspective." He then asked her if she genuinely did not realize we were brothers when we first met. Rachel told him she had no clue since we do not look alike or act alike in any way. Jason seemed to accept that and dropped the subject. Before leaving, Jason told me I could take back his wedding invitation because he could not, in good conscience, support our relationship. I told him he had nothing to worry about, he was already on the uninvite list. It has been a few hours since the conversation, and honestly, I feel a little better. My parents are not thrilled about Jason being excluded from the wedding, but they understand it is the right decision. My sisters told me they had always suspected Jason's behavior was fueled by jealousy rather than any legitimate reason, and they completely support my choice to keep him out of the event. For now, I plan to keep my distance from Jason. I doubt he will reach out to me anytime soon, and honestly, that is probably for the best. Once again, Thank you to everyone who has taken the time to read and comment. If anything major happens, I will provide another update. Comments where I replied. Why did Rachel not know about your family? When Rachel and I first started dating, I was not very open about my family. The truth is, I had moved out of state to put some distance between myself and my parents. My sister, Amanda, eventually encouraged me to reconnect, and that is the only reason I started speaking to them again. Rachel understood that it was a sensitive topic for me and never pushed for details. She respected my boundaries, and I appreciated that. Update 2. To clarify, I originally posted both updates together, but they actually happened about 2 weeks apart. It is possible the updates got stuck or removed on the subreddit, so I am sharing them here directly. It has been a while since my last update, and a few things have happened since I last spoke with Luke. I have been keeping my distance from Luke since our conversation. Neither of us has reached out, and the only time we interact is during family gatherings, which is fine by me. The issue now is my mom. She is upset that Luke is still not invited to my wedding. This all came to a head during my younger sister Abby's birthday. She just turned 22, and her boyfriend proposed to her at the end of the night. We were all sitting around afterward, chatting about wedding plans. Abby talked about wanting a destination wedding, her ideas for the dress and cake, and other details. At one point, she turned to me and said something like, "Hey, Matt, I know Luke is not invited to your wedding, but you are not going to care if I invite him to mine, right?" I laughed and told her I had no say over her guest list. My mom, however, gave me this strange look and asked if Luke was really still not invited to my wedding. I told her yes, and she got visibly annoyed. She said she thought I was joking when I first mentioned it and told me I was being unreasonable for excluding him from the wedding just because he is family. She accused me of being petty and holding a grudge. I reminded her that Luke and I had both agreed that it was better if he stayed away. I also told her this was not the time to bring it up since the day was supposed to be about Abby. If she or Luke wanted to discuss my wedding, they could call me another time. Abby actually stepped in at that point and told Mom to stop making her birthday about Luke. That seemed to end the conversation for the moment. For anyone wondering, Luke did not attend Abby's party. He had to work that night, so he was not there to weigh in. A few days later, Mom stopped by my house, clearly still upset. She said she wanted to talk about the wedding and asked why I was so adamant about not letting Luke come. She told me I was overreacting to the situation and accused me of being insecure about Luke and Rachel's past. I told her again that Luke and I had mutually agreed he would not attend and that if he wanted to change that, he could speak to me directly. That led to an argument. Mom said that if I refused to re-invite Luke, she would not attend the wedding either because I was ostracizing her son. I just shrugged and told her that was her choice. I was not going to beg her to come. I also reminded her that this would not be the first time she had skipped one of my events because of Luke. At that, she accused me of being an ass for throwing her past mistakes back in her face and stormed out. After she left, I started getting calls and messages from her and other family members, telling me I was in the wrong and that I should re-invite Luke to keep the peace. Mom also tried reaching out to Rachel directly, asking her to convince me to change my mind. As far as I know, Rachel has not responded to her. At this point, most of my mom's side of the family is backing her up and saying they will not come to the wedding either. On the other hand, my dad, my aunt and uncle, their kids, and both of my sisters are still planning to attend. Of course, Rachel's family is coming as well. I spoke to Luke about it to make sure he was okay with everything. He told me he had no problem staying out of it and said he did not understand why Mom was making such a big deal. He also said he would tell her the same thing if she asked him. For now, I am keeping my distance from my mom. My dad and I are still on decent terms, and I have told him that even if Mom changes her mind, I am not sure I will re-invite her. He understands. Because of all this, Rachel and I have started looking at smaller venues since our guest list has shrunk significantly. Update 3. My mom is now officially uninvited from the wedding. About 2 weeks after she announced she would not be attending, she showed up at our house unexpectedly, saying she wanted to clear the air. Rachel and I decided to let her in and invited her to join us for dinner. While we were eating, I asked her if she was still planning to skip the wedding. She said that while she wanted to come, she could not get over the fact that Luke was not invited. She called it a simple mistake on Luke's part and said I was being unfair. I reminded her that his simple mistake was proposing to my fiancé while I was sitting 3 feet away. Her response? She laughed it off and said it was just a joke. Rachel asked her why she wanted to talk if she was not going to change her position. Mom said she wanted to speak directly to Rachel, hoping she could convince Rachel to take her side and talk me into inviting Luke again. She even admitted she thought I would be at work and she could catch Rachel alone. Rachel, always the calm one, politely told her that even if I had not been home, she would not have entertained that conversation without me. She pointed out that this was an issue involving both me and Luke, and she would never go behind my back to resolve it. It all came to a breaking point with my mom. During a heated discussion, she made a comment about Rachel, calling her spineless and saying she could not have a conversation without me speaking for her. That insult set off a fierce argument between the three of us. Rachel eventually had enough and told my mom to leave. As Rachel got up to unlock the front door, my mom followed her, yelling the whole way. By this point, she was accusing Rachel of tearing our family apart. Then, out of nowhere, my mom grabbed Rachel by the hair, yanked her to the ground, and started screaming at her. She hit Rachel and even tried to scratch her face before I stepped in. I pulled my mom off of Rachel and shoved her out of the house. She pounded on the door for several minutes while I made sure Rachel was okay. Eventually, my mom left, but she kept calling both of our phones repeatedly after that. Once Rachel was calmed down and safe, I sent my mom a text telling her not to contact us again. I made it clear that we would never speak to her again. Afterward, I called my dad and sisters to let them know what had happened. My dad was shocked and tried to explain away her behavior, saying she had been stressed about everything. My sisters, on the other hand, were not surprised. They said they had been expecting her to snap eventually since, in their words, she has always been a complete nightmare. My sisters came over to check on Rachel, and we had a serious conversation about what to do next. I asked Rachel if she wanted to press charges against my mom, but she said no. She just wanted to cut contact with her for good. I told her I understood but suggested we at least file a police report to document the incident in case anything like this happened again. Rachel was hesitant. She felt guilty about the idea of her arresting my mom over this, even though it was a clear case of physical assault. Thankfully, Rachel's mom and my sisters came by later to comfort her. She is holding up well, but I still cannot believe this happened. Comments where I replied. Could this all have been avoided if Luke had just been honest with your mom? It absolutely could have. But I do not think Luke knows the meaning of accountability. He genuinely seems to believe he has no part in this mess. I doubt anything I say will convince him otherwise, especially since my mom seems to do everything with him in mind. A reply to someone asking about pressing charges. Rachel is still against pursuing formal charges. But after reading some of your advice, I talked to her about how things could escalate. She has agreed to file a report with the police to at least document what happened. She also mentioned wanting to talk to my dad about the possibility of getting my mom into therapy or some kind of treatment for her increasingly erratic behavior. For now, we are officially moving forward with cutting off all contact. Some background on my relationship with my parents. A few people have been asking why I was not upfront with Rachel about my family dynamic earlier. Here is some context to help explain things. My brother Luke has always been the golden child. My mom adored him and made no effort to hide it. Meanwhile, my sisters and I were essentially afterthoughts unless we did something to benefit Luke. For example, my parents would take Luke shopping while leaving us with a babysitter. They would bring him home expensive new clothes and toys while the rest of us got thrifted items or nothing at all. When my sisters and I got gifts, they were always shared gifts. But anything given to Luke was his alone, and my mom made it clear we were not allowed to touch his things. The worst part? Whenever Luke got in trouble, I was usually the one punished. My parents would say it was my fault for not being a good role model. One time, when Luke was 8, he got in trouble for trying to push another kid down the stairs at school. I ended up grounded for 2 weeks and was even forced to apologize to the kids' parents for not teaching Luke better. When I turned 13, I convinced my parents to give me an allowance as long as I handled chores like mowing the lawn, raking leaves, and taking out the trash. They agreed, and I started earning $25 a week. That did not sit well with Luke. He demanded an allowance too, and instead of making him work for it, my parents just took $10 out of my weekly pay and gave it to him. He never did a single chore. Anytime I asked him to help, his response was always, "Why should I? It's not my job." It was around this time that I started pulling away from Luke. By high school, we barely talked unless we absolutely had to. It was around this time that I began putting real distance between me and my brother. By the time I started high school, Luke and I only talked when we needed a favor or when we absolutely could not avoid it. When I turned 17, I got my first job. My goal was simple: save up to buy my own car and earn money that my parents could not redirect to Luke. My oldest sister, Emily, was a lifesaver during that time. She helped me open my first bank account and taught me how to budget and save properly. Thanks to her guidance and my hard work, I bought my first car at 18. For a while, things went smoothly. My parents asked if Luke could borrow my car to practice driving and get around occasionally. I was hesitant but agreed, as long as he took care of it. To his credit, Luke actually kept up with the maintenance and returned it in good condition. But then, Luke started pushing for my parents to buy him his own car. Instead of saving up or finding a job, he just expected them to hand one to him. When that didn't happen, my mom came to me with what she clearly thought was a simple solution: I should give him my car. Her reasoning? He needed it more than I did. When I refused, she threatened to kick me out of the house. The argument that night was ugly, and it ended with her taking me to transfer the car's ownership to Luke within days. I did not have anywhere else to go, so I caved. I signed the car over to him and just swallowed the loss. Graduating high school should have been a happy moment, but, of course, Luke was at the center of that too. My parents skipped my ceremony entirely because Luke did not want to sit through it. My mom's excuse? She didn't want to leave him home alone. The only people there to cheer me on were my sisters and my aunt and uncle. To make it worse, my parents asked my aunt and uncle to bring me home early because they had made dinner to celebrate. When I got there, I found a meal I couldn't even eat: shrimp and chicken served together on the same plate. I'm allergic to shellfish. After high school, I worked 2 jobs to save up for another car. By the time the new school year rolled around, I had moved out and started college, cutting off contact with my parents entirely. At first, my mom tried to get in touch through social media or by using my younger sister, Abby, as a go-between. I made it clear to Abby that if she kept pushing, I would have to cut her off too. When that didn't work, my mom tried reaching out through my older sisters, Emily and Sarah, and even through Luke. I eventually threatened to file a restraining order, though it was an empty threat. I had no idea how to go about doing that. Thankfully, it was enough to make her stop. From then on, the only messages I received were happy holidays texts once or twice a year. A few years later, when I moved back, Sarah told me that my parents had been seeing a family therapist at her request. She said they wanted to apologize and work on rebuilding our relationship. I was skeptical but agreed to try, as long as they were sincere. That doesn't even scratch the surface of everything I went through with them. It took years for me to even consider letting them back into my life. When I met Rachel, I wasn't sure where things were heading, either with her or with my family. I avoided bringing up my parents, partly because I didn't know if I'd stay in contact with them for long. Rachel was understanding and didn't push for details. She respected that it was a sensitive topic, which I appreciated more than I can say. I hope this clears up some of the questions people have been asking. Comments where I replied, "Why didn't you demand they pay you back for the car?" Honestly, getting reimbursed wasn't a battle I wanted to fight. The damage was already done. Even now, it's hard to wrap my head around the fact that Luke was always the favorite. He wasn't special in any way. I don't mean that as an insult, he was just a regular kid. My parents didn't have fertility issues, he wasn't a miracle baby, and he wasn't a genius or anything. He was just Luke. It's as if they woke up one day and decided he deserved everything while the rest of us got the leftovers. Are you sure you're not adopted? Nope, I'm biological. Unfortunately, they couldn't deny me even if they wanted to. Ha! There was a time when I tried to make excuses for them. But at some point, I had to face the truth. They're just two people who never should have had kids. Update 4. First, thank you to everyone who has taken the time to comment or offer advice. The support has meant a lot to me and Rachel. We've read through so many of your responses together, and we appreciate every single one, even the critical ones. Now, to answer the most common question, why did I decide to reconnect with my parents after everything? The short answer is simple: my sisters. Sarah wanted the whole family to be around for the birth of her first child and to support her while she adjusted to being a new mom. She didn't want a situation where we were only part-time aunts and uncles, showing up for holidays and birthdays. Growing up, Sarah was never the type to ask for much. So when she told me how much it would mean to her if I gave reconciliation a shot, I agreed. I also think part of me hoped they had changed. I don't regret trying, though. Even if my parents are still as toxic as ever, reconnecting gave me something amazing. I met the love of my life, Rachel. So in the end, I call it a win. It has been a whirlwind, and I finally have an update to share. Apologies in advance if it is all over the place. A lot has happened. After much deliberation, we decided to file a police report about what happened with my mom. The officers told us that, even though Rachel does not want to press charges, it is not ultimately our call whether the matter is pursued. They did say they would take our preferences into account. We provided solid evidence of the assault, photos of Rachel's injuries, and a string of texts from my mom and dad discussing the incident. They advised us to document and report any further incidents with my mom, just in case things escalate in the future. While I doubt anything will come of it, at least it is officially on record now. Shortly after, I received around 100 angry text messages from my mom. At the very least, it seems the police spoke with her about the situation. Not long after, my mom showed up outside my workplace. She cornered me in the parking lot, shouting about how I was trying to ruin her life. Her yelling quickly escalated, with accusations of me being an ungrateful son and demands for me to call off the police. I calmly told her that if she did not want legal trouble, maybe she should not have hit Rachel. She screamed back that it was all a misunderstanding and demanded I tell the authorities to drop the report. I refused and reminded her it was out of my hands now. That response set her off. She had a full-blown tantrum in the lot, hitting me several times on the chest and arms before security stepped in and escorted her off the property. Later that day, I explained the situation to my boss. Thankfully, she was understanding and supportive after I laid everything out. When I got home, I told Rachel what had happened. She was visibly upset but did not seem surprised. She insisted we sit down and come up with a plan for dealing with my family moving forward. During our talk, we agreed to cut off all contact with my family, aside from my sisters. Neither of us wanted to deal with the unnecessary stress, especially since we are not even married yet. Rachel also suggested moving somewhere farther from my family. She admitted she had tried to stay out of my family issues because she felt it was not her place to intervene. But after everything with my mom and my dad enabling her behavior, she said she had reached her breaking point. It was a long and difficult conversation, but in the end, I agreed. My parents and brother are more trouble than they are worth, and I do not want to keep putting Rachel through this. I also promised Rachel that I would start therapy, and she has been helping me find a therapist. The final straw, a conversation with my parents. After our decision, I reached out to my dad to let him know about the no-contact decision. He did not pick up the first time, so I left a message asking if we could have a serious talk. When he called back, he asked if my mom could join the conversation. I agreed, knowing she needed to hear this too. I laid it all out. I told them both that Rachel and I were cutting ties with them completely. My dad demanded an explanation, asking why I would throw away all the work we had done to repair our relationship. I explained that everything with Luke had proven nothing had really changed. They still prioritize my mom and Luke above all else. I reminded them of the years of favoritism, the blatant disrespect toward me and Rachel, and how their behavior had brought us to a breaking point. I also told my mom directly that I was done being her scapegoat for her poor parenting and Luke's entitlement. I made it clear that I would never forgive her for what she did to Rachel or the way she treated me and my sisters growing up. She tried to interrupt, saying I should move on like my sisters have. I cut her off, telling her to focus on their forgiveness because she would never get it from me. At that, she broke down, crying and asking how I could be so cruel to her. She claimed I had done nothing but try to ruin her life and that she regretted ever having me. Hearing that pushed Rachel over the edge. She lit into my mom, calling her disgusting and plenty of other colorful terms for saying something so vile. My mom finally went silent after that. Whether she left the room or just stopped talking, I am not sure. My dad, meanwhile, tried a different approach. He begged me to reconsider, saying it was unfair to punish my mom for her struggles raising us. He ended by pleading that we were a family and should not let past mistakes get in the way of moving forward. I told him point blank that nothing he said would change my mind. I also made it clear that I was done trying to force a relationship that was clearly one-sided. I ended the call by saying it was up to him whether he wanted to keep my number. Either way, I was blocking both him and my mom on everything and would not be reaching out again. I told my dad flat out that the only people my mom had ever truly cared about were Mark and herself. Nothing he could say or do would change my mind. I made it clear it was his choice whether he wanted to keep my number or not. Either way, I was blocking him and my mom on everything, and I had no plans to reach out again. After that, I hung up. Later that day, I sat down and composed a long email address to my entire family. I included a link to my previous posts and officially uninvited everyone from the wedding except for my aunt, uncle, and my sisters. Once it was sent, I broke down. I had not cried like that in years, but Jen held me and reassured me that everything would be okay. My sisters contacted me not long after reading the email. Charlotte, in particular, apologized for putting me in the position of trying to reconcile, but I told her there was no need to be sorry. She assured me she understood and said it was not my fault for cutting them off again. The rest of the family's response was a mixed bag. Some were furious that I aired our personal issues online for everyone to see. Others were angry at my parents, claiming they never realized how bad things had gotten. The last person I spoke to about everything was Mark. He asked if I planned to cut him off too. I told him no, but also said I would not be going out of my way to keep in touch. He accepted that without argument, wished me luck with the wedding, and we have not spoken since. Moving forward. Jen and I are actively looking for a new place to live. Our plan is to move closer to her brother, who lives about 3 hours from where we are now. We both really like the area he is in, and it seems like a good opportunity for a fresh start. I talked to my boss about transferring, and Jen is exploring the possibility of switching to fully remote work or even finding a new job altogether. Since our guest list has been significantly reduced, we are also making changes to our wedding plans. My uncle has offered his lake house as a potential venue, and we are seriously considering it. For now, I do not plan to post any more updates unless something major happens. I am ready to move on with my life and put this chapter behind me. If anyone has questions, I will try to answer what I can. Thanks for all the support, and happy holidays. Comments where I have responded. Do you think your mom will try to figure out where you move to? Oh, I am already bracing myself for the fallout when we move. She has always been the type to obsess when things do not go her way, and I have no doubt she will try to track us down. I have already consulted with a lawyer friend to explore the possibility of a restraining order to stop her before she even starts. Thanks for the kind words, and happy holidays. Has your mom read the comments? According to Sophie, yes. She has gone through quite a few of them, and unsurprisingly, she does not think random people on the internet have the right to judge her. Honestly, I do not think there is anything left in me to try to reconcile with her. I wish them the best, but from a safe distance.